not quite sure if you should or if you want to at all, but you still put both feet right on the carpet by your bed or your floor by your bed, and then you give it one last thought, and then you stand up, and you know it's too late. You can't go back. If you hadn't stood up, you can still give yourself 3 minutes or 5, maybe 20, and you lay back down, you just stay there, and then you're late. But if you get up, it's you're in, you're committed. And then you start to wander around your house, and you kind of know where you're going. Like sometimes it's to brush your teeth. For me, it's always the kitchen because that's where the coffee maker is. And I've got an awesome wife, and she always sets it so that at like 4:30, 4:45, it starts brewing, and by the time that we get there, there's warm, hot coffee right there. And so I'm wandering through the house, and my eyes are still half closed. I think there's still those things that make your eyelashes stick together dangling from my face. And I get to the kitchen, and I walk through, and I make my way over to the coffee pot, and I look over at this board that we've got hanging there, and I thought I saw a bird. And it was the strangest thing, which is not really unusual, though, because often when you do the groggy walk through your house in the morning, you see stuff that isn't really there, right? Like, oh, Grandma's here. And like, no, Grandma died 5 years ago. It's just like a pillow or something on the couch. But you keep going, and I saw this bird. And like some of you laughed really quietly at that. I saw this bird. And I thought, there's no way that's a bird. So I poured myself coffee, and I looked back over, and there's still a bird there. And I realized it's not a real bird, it's a fake bird. So I go over to this bird, right? And it's really, really bright yellow. And I'd never seen this bird before, but I go up really close to it, and I see it's actually, it's a sketch. It's a colored sketch of this really bright bird. And I don't know anything about birds, but I knew this one was really pretty. It was like a really inviting bird. So I'm staring at it, and I thought, well, that's a really good-looking bird. I wonder where this bird came from. So I start looking at some of the lines, and I realize there's like different colors in there. I looked at the beak, and there's a little bit of like orange in the beak. That's the only place where the orange was. So I thought, oh, whoever made this was being careful. Like, they only put this one color in this one spot. And as I looked at the whole thing, it's not huge. It's only like this big, like the whole thing. And I'm looking at it, there's a ton of detail in a little tiny bit of space. And I stood like staring at this bird forever. I was like captivated by this bird, this strange bird that I'd never seen before. And a few minutes later, my wife, Kirsten, she walks in, and she gets her car, she goes, "How do you like my bird?" I'm like, "What do you mean, you bought this?" She's like, "No, I drew that." And I thought, oh, I never knew that Kirsten could draw anything. Like, I'd never seen her draw so much as a stick figure. Like, when we were dating, she would put hearts on the notes we would write back and forth, but they weren't that great. And like, and I thought, like, oh, cool. Like, I could tell it's a heart. It looks like a diamond, but I can tell she's going for a heart. And I thought, like, I never knew this thing about you. It's been 13 years of marriage, and another, it took me forever to ask her the question. So we'd been together a long time. It's been like, I never knew you could do that. And I started wondering since then till today, when is the last time that I ever learned something completely new about God? Can you name that? The last time that you learned something completely new about God. So, here's Ezekiel 1. I should get to it. This right here is my timer so that I'm done on time. The battery's almost dead, though. In the 13th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day, I was among the exiles by the river Chebar. This is written by Ezekiel, apparently firsthand. This is verse 1 of chapter 1. And then the heavens opened up. That's a great way to start, right? Like, that's your hook. Then the heavens opened up, and I saw visions. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin. The word of the Lord came to the priest Ezekiel in the land of the Chaldeans, and the hand of the Lord was on him there. And as I looked, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually. You're catching this, right? Like, I'm actually not going to explain too much. Just try. In fact, if it's easier for you, like, I know that I try to capture these things. not by note-taking so much, but like when I try to sketch them. So if you're so inclined, you do have paper and pencils on the end of each row. If you'd like to use those, go for it. It won't bug me if you're like sketching while I read. Forth continually, and in the middle of the fire, something like gleaming amber. So let's do hard stop right there. What in the world did I just read? Like, who caught any of that? Who caught one thing about that description? Fire. Like, what? Tell me about this fire. There's not much to say, right? Except that there's fire. Like, where's the fire? In the middle of what? In the middle of a storm. Who caught, who, if Kathy hadn't said that, who'd captured there's a storm and there's fire in the middle of the storm? I mean, I only read like one verse. So if I go through the rest of it, we're totally lost. But, like, there's fire.
It sounded like the fires out in California. The fire in the middle of the forest.
Yeah, fire tornadoes. I love those things. That's why we moved here. You know, it's really interesting. This is totally nothing to do with my sermon. It actually feels really good to see you all. It's interesting that I didn't realize until right now when Kathy spoke up and Rich spoke up that I really actually missed all of you, which is weird because I never miss anybody. Like, we moved away from all these friends in California a year ago, and then we went back and saw them. I hadn't thought about them for a moment over the last year, and I feel like it's actually really good to see you guys. So a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud with bright... So, like, try to capture this, okay? Stormy wind out of the north. A great cloud with brightness around it. Like, what does that mean? That looks like the cloud is like silhouetted by the sunlight, right? Like there might... So anyways, so there's a great cloud with brightness around it, and then fire flashing forth continually. Like lightning. It makes you think of lightning, right, in the middle of a cloud. And you guys are not strangers to clouds with lightning in them. That's why we're moving back to the tornadoes. And something, by the way, we're not moving back, I'm kidding. Fire flashing forth in the middle of the fire. Now, here's the thing. In the middle of the fire, something like gleaming amber. Like the gleaming amber's there, and it's not just in the storm, and it's not flashing back and forth. There's fire in the middle, and in the middle of the fire, there's gleaming amber. When was the last time you learned something completely new about God? Right? Now check this out. By the way, do you guys, like, is that all perfectly clear? We know what this is telling us about God so far? Jamie's not like, yes, perfect. Well, go based on this curve. Now, if you're confused about what this is teaching you about God, don't worry. This will clarify it. In the middle of this storm, fire, amber thing was something like 4 living creatures. Let's pray. This was their appearance. Thank goodness it's going to give us a description so that we know with perfect clarity where this is going. They were of human form. Each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. All right. What are we learning about God? How great would it be if we got to the end and I just said nothing? Okay.
Somebody said some
bad mushrooms. Bad mushrooms. Ezekiel is clearly intoxicated.
It says, the first thing it says is that they were of human form, and I don't know any humans that have 4 faces and wings.
Did any of you guys catch that? It said these things, like if you want to picture what these creatures are, 4 of them, mind you, in the middle of the storm thing with fire dashing back and forth and then gleaming amber in the middle of it. Now we've got these 4 creatures, thank goodness that clarifies things. At least we know they look like humans. And what kind of humans? Humans that have 4 faces, hoof feet, and wings. What do you guys think? Kirsten, you're standing up in the middle of the sermon. What do you think? What do you guys think this is telling us? I mean, who's read this before? Nick's got it. Karen might have. If you've read this before, what have you made of it? Like, what do you do when you come? I know, like, as you guys do your annual reading through the whole Bible, which you all do with your, when you come to Ezekiel, right after you do like the other two major prophets, you come to the third major prophet, you come to chapter 1. What do you do with it? You skip right over this thing because it talks about these freaky creatures, right? And then you think, like, is this really in the Bible? Somebody approved this? Like, Pastor Phil approved this thing, and it's in the Bible now. It's chapter 1. What does this mean? What is this teaching you about God? He what? He can do anything. He can create these suckers, right? Like he made these 4 creature things. Oh, the phone died. Oops. He can do anything. So maybe that's one thing it teaches you. How did you see that in this text?
Well, just it's so unbelievable. Like how did that happen?
Right. So far, a couple theories. This one is either pointing towards God can do anything, right? Anything's possible with God. Or Ezekiel's super high. Like that's the other possibility. Okay. Should we go on? Oh, yeah. And the first thing you said is God is in your dream state? That's interesting. So like the things that you would see before the groggy walk in the morning, right? You're in this dream state where you mix all these things that in real life independently work well, but then you're dreaming, you kind of mush them all together, right? Yeah. Often in my dreams, like I transition from like I'm in one place and then I'm in another place, but I didn't move, or I'm one person, then I'm a different person. That like dream states are weird. Each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight. I don't know what that means, by the way. I mean, I know what a straight leg is, but I don't know what the like their legs were bent or twisted. I don't know. The soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like bronze. Under their wings, on each of their 4 sides, they had human hands. And the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Thank goodness, another explanation. We get to learn more about God real quick. Their wings touched one another. Each of them moved straight ahead without turning as they moved. So I've read quite a bit already. This is more than I've ever done in one single service at this church. We're already through verse 9. Score. What are you thinking? What's going through your mind? Yes.
Twice it mentions middle, the word middle.
Okay.
And it makes me think that God needs to be in the middle of everything we do, not on the edges,
Okay.
not low, not to the side, but in the middle of everything.
Okay. Like this is a centralizing God in your decision-making, life, priority set. Okay. There is one very literary point to be made there. You guys know ancient Hebrew was written with no punctuation at all. One of the forms that they used to emphasize was repetition. They had no exclamation marks. It's not always applicable, but at times it is. When you see something repeated over, like holy, 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 if you see 3 of them, it's super exclaimed, right? Okay. What else do you guys see? Yes? God's creative. Okay? Super creative. Like shroomy creative. Like this is like he's on bad mushrooms creative in this case. Okay, what else? Yeah, we hadn't touched on that possible interpretation of this. The Bible, especially in the prophetic text of the Old Testament and the apocryphal literature, it does use a lot of symbolism, where the things being described actually represent something completely different, right? Or not completely different, but something different. So there is always a possibility that this is somehow symbolic of something else. I don't discard that interpretation. One thing about it, there is less indication internal to the text that point towards symbolism than in most texts that point towards symbolism, but still very possible. Should we go on? Yeah. Yeah.
So they're in a circle, kind of, or touching.
Okay.
So are they protecting the thing in the middle, or is
Well, it doesn't.
shielding
That's interesting because does it lay out a purpose for any of it? No, so far no purpose at all, right? So far just raw description. But let's think about these wings for a second. It said what about the wings? Kathy, can you find that verse real quick and that descriptor?
Their wings touched one another,
Okay.
each of them moving straight ahead without turning as they moved.
Okay, so their wings all touch one another. You can maybe even disregard the hands that stick out from underneath there right now. That's kind of weird, right? So anyways, there's these hands that stick out from under the wings. But the wings are there. Each of them had how many wings? 4. Each creature had 4 wings. And we have how many creatures? For a total of how many wings? So 16 wings. So if any of you guys are sketching this, your math should be right. Like you should have 16 wings on your paper. 16 wings. Now the wings are touching one another, right? Now, does that mean that the wings of each individual creature are touching each other? Or does that mean that they're touching each other's wings? How do you read it? They're touching each other's wings. Okay, so who thinks they're touching each other's wings? Like who thinks that that each creature's wings are just touching the other wing of the same creature? Oh, interesting. So there's a little difference there. Okay, cool. How many of you guys that raise your hand are actually trying to draw this thing? Cool. Okay, so there's this thing. So let's think about the wings. There's 4 of them. Keep the wings in mind because the description comes back to the wings. Now, let's just clarify too. They also have 4 what? Each creature has 4 faces, right? But they each have 1 head. So are these 4 faces lined up next to each other? Or you're thinking like a rotation type thing? It's like one of those like one of those toys where like you bang them together, you punch one, and his face spins, right? And now it's a bruised face. You guys have seen those? Like the old Legos, or like I used to have these superheroes where Superman was smiling, but if Batman punched him, he laughed. But if Green Lantern punched him, his face spun around, and now Superman was sad. So this is one of those where like there are 4 faces that rotate, right? Have we gotten to the descriptor of the faces? Okay, here we go. Their wings touched one another. Each of them moved straight ahead without, this is key by the way, without turning as they moved. Don't forget that. As for their appearance, the appearance of the faces, the 4 had the face of a human, the face of a lion on the right side of the face, the face of an ox on the left side of the face, and the face of an eagle. I imagine that the eagle and human then make up the front and back, right? So you've got a right side lion, left side ox, front and back human eagle, right? Unless you do think of them as like straight across in a row, which the text doesn't say they're not. But it does say that they move straight ahead, which somewhat informs your understanding of the faces. So far, what do you think you're learning about God? Okay. Where did you get that? Okay. Interesting. Okay, yeah, we have quite a distribution here. Gail, this part actually points more clearly towards a symbolic interpretation. Usually, when we have this distribution of animal species, like a lion, a human, eagle, ox, that does point towards some sort of a symbolic understanding. It represents something else. That's probably the closest that this text comes to something like that. Anything else about God? Yes? So Laura's comment or question is, might this text point towards some sort of equality among these created species that challenges the human superiority model that a lot of us work with, or mental model of it? I don't have an answer. I don't think that it does, but again, this is the first time that I've ever read this. Okay. Such were their faces. Now we come back to the wings. I hope you guys haven't forgotten the wings. The wings are really important wings. And so is their position, and so is their motion. Their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 wings covered their own bodies. That gives it some clarity, right? We were wondering whether they touched each other's. So 2 of their wings, 2 of the 4 wings, touched another creature's wings, and 2 covered their own bodies. And then we go back to this. Each moved straight ahead. Why? We talked about repetition, right? How many times has it talked about the motion of the creatures? Actually, let's just put it this way. How many times has it talked about motion? Twice the motion of the creatures, right? And what has it said about the creatures? They move straight ahead without turning. They don't turn. They move straight ahead. How are the creatures positioned if each of their wings are touching the wings of another creature? In a circle. So if they're in a circle, which way is straight ahead? Circle. What was that? In the middle. But the middle of what, though? Like in the center of them? The like space between. So like let's say the 4 creatures are in a circle type thing, and the wings touch each other, and they form this enclosure of space. They're each moving straight inward? They're each moving. They're all moving upward. You think straight ahead is upward. Why does it have to be? Interesting. Okay, that's right. You're saying that's the only possibility for all of them, for it to be straight ahead for all of them, if they're each facing a different direction. Interesting. Who thinks differently? Somebody else said up, by the way. Was that Nicole? Was that you? Somebody else also said up. Okay. Okay. So the only way that they can move is up. For it to hold that all of them are moving straight without what? Without turning, because if they could turn, they can alternate, right? You can move straight in this direction for a while, and then you can turn. Now this is forward, you can move straight in this. Like, let's give the lion a turn to move forward and straight ahead without turning. But apparently that's not what it's doing, because they don't turn. They always move straight ahead. Now, by the way, do they ever stop? It doesn't say that they stop, but it emphasizes the point that they always move. Is there other motion in the text? Oh, wait, before we go to that, yes. Oh, so that like as a whole, they're in the same spot, but they're moving in place. Interesting. Does that also maintain the motion requirements of the text? Lou. Think about that. Nobody else brought that up. Think about that. He said, if they have 4 faces, are they facing 4 directions at the same time? They would have to, right? Because we learn that the 4 faces are not in line. We learn that there is a right side, a left side, a front, and a back. And so if they're facing 4 directions at the same time, that's just one creature. How many faces do we have altogether? 16 faces altogether. What are you guys learning new about God? Anything? God has a sense of humor. No, see, in LA, it's only 7:15 a.m. Okay, don't forget any of that. Keep all of that in mind. In the middle of the living creatures, there was something that looked like burning coals of fire. Now, you guys can all picture burning coals of fire, right? You've seen them in your fireplace. You've seen them when you grill, if you like doing that. If you live in California, you see them everywhere. So you can picture those pretty clearly. So if you're sketching this, that's a no-brainer, right? Little square thing, coal. However, then there's a comma. Like torches. Now picture a coal and then picture a torch. I mean, they've got some things in common, right? The thing in common might be the glow, the heat, the fire. But they don't look too similar, right? Now, check this out. Like torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. So this is the space that Karen identified is there, right? If we've got them in a circle, they create an internal space that's kind of empty. Now, inside of that space, there are these things that are like coals. But hang on, as soon as you've got that in your mind and it's clear as day, no, now they're like torches. And not only are they like torches, but they're like darting torches. It doesn't say how fast, but the creatures themselves are moving. So this is like you moving inside of an airplane, right? There's motion inside of motion. Now you're moving inside of the already moving creatures, and these torches move back and forth among the creatures. The fire was bright, and lightning issued from the fire. So not only are these coal/torch things that are in the middle of the creatures darting back and forth, but they are also emitting lightning as they move. Now work back outward to the beginning. Not only do we have this lightning that's being emitted from these torch coal things that are in the middle of four creatures that each have four wings and four faces, moving in every direction without turning as they go, possibly upward, possibly around like a carousel. But they're apparently in the middle of this gleaming amber that's in the middle of a storm, that's in the middle of a fire, that's also shooting lightning out back and forth. What in the world is Ezekiel describing? Why do we have this? What is God telling us about himself, if anything? We've got like 2 minutes, so you guys better get there quick. A lot of energy. There's a lot of activity here. So have we gotten anything that's sitting still? But have we gotten a lot of the opposite? So maybe there's one thing there. Any other thoughts? I'll keep reading. Yeah. It does have that feeling, doesn't it? Like there's this like frenetic energy, like motion, like constantly going and going and going. And just when you think you've got it, then you learn that atoms actually can be split down farther and farther and farther. And so you get to these things that are like entangled, where they can be like miles away and still affect each other physically and stuff like that. But an atom isn't the only thing that looks like it's got a nucleus with things that revolve continually around it. If you go to the opposite extreme of the universe, you've got the same thing around galaxies and solar systems. Is this saying that God is a galaxy? No, not at all. But that is a really good illustration. The living creatures also darted, check this out, to and fro, like a flash of lightning. We might have to stop there, but we might not. If the creatures are darting to and fro, then what do we do with our idea of their motion from earlier? If they're darting to and fro, then what are they not doing? If they're darting to and fro, then they're not always going straight ahead. Because the two things cannot be combined. They cannot coexist. You can't be something that moves back and forth all the time, but then is also simultaneously always moving forward in the same direction without turning as you go, which is what we were told earlier was happening with these things. That is absolutely impossible. It is physically unfeasible for that to be happening. Unless I'm somehow wrong about that. Is there a physical explanation that can somehow account for the entirety of the descriptors that we've gotten so far in this text? Oh, so you're thinking like maybe they're like... Sure, like rub your stomach and... Yeah, no, I can't do any of that. So like this continual, like the larger motion is still going this way or up or even in the circular way, but as they go, they're like individually like vibrating or something. They're doing what? Pulsating is another word. This is, if like I wish I could record all you guys are talking about pulsating and atoms and galaxies and vibrating and shaking their heads and all this. I've never had a Bible study like this before. Super interesting. We should do this text more often. What are you learning new about God? One more time. He doesn't fit in our boxes. What boxes might those be? The laws of physics. He doesn't fit in the laws of physics box. What is... The comment there was, God dwells in another dimension. It was a comment there. And I'll say faith. So now we're talking about the opening Ezekiel's eyes to give him spiritual insight into something that we don't have a line of sight to, typically. What else? By the way, that's only half the description. After there, it gets weird. Up till there, it's crystal clear. But after this, it starts talking about wheels and eyeballs and actually different kinds of motion. And then it goes back to maintaining that they never turn. Key point here that we may have all missed was the opening. I read through it really quickly. I simply said Ezekiel is where? Among the exiles. You thought no, I want to just get to the storm part. The storm is the cool part, the storm that comes from the north. He's among the exiles. What does that mean? Who are the exiles? The Jews are the exiles, the nation of Israel and Judah. These were a subset of the nation of Judah that had not been demolished during the conquest of the Babylonians. They had survived that, and they had been deported from their homeland and then imported into a different place, into a different territory. That was a standard tactic of the old empires, the Assyrians, the Neo-Assyrians, the Babylonians. They would take and deport. This is during the second exile, the second deportation. They take all of them, including Ezekiel, because Ezekiel was a priest. They took all of the high-level nobility and officials. They put them in this new land. And so now Ezekiel is by this river in this new land. Why does that matter? You might need to know a little bit of the theology of the time to know why that matters. Kathy, you might have this in your notes. The theology of the time was that if God was on your side and you were part of the people of God, in battle you would be what? Victorious. What had just happened to the nation of Israel? They'd been demolished, wiped out. Their temple, where they thought God dwelt, had been brought down to rubble. Every theological notion, all of their understanding, all of these boxes of God that they had built had been torn away. And what they held most dear in their theology, in their understanding of their relationship with God, that God was for them and would protect them and bring them through any difficulty and make them as numerous as the stars in the sky, as had been promised in a covenant, all of that was now in limbo and brought into question. And so Ezekiel was sitting by this river in the land of the enemy where God was thought to never show up. Now, the place where God was supposed to live was completely demolished. The place where God wasn't supposed to be is where he showed up. Do you see that? Their entire box of understanding of God, all of their notions, all of these traditions, all of these things that they pin God down to, all of these ideas about how to become a Christian, how to be saved, how to be a disciple, how to worship in the right way at the expense of other ways, all of these things that they held so dear that they wouldn't let go of are what brought down their entire religion at the time. It brought their temple to rubble because they wouldn't let go of their boxes. They wouldn't let go of these notions. They weren't open to thinking, maybe there is something about God that I don't know, and maybe he moves and works, and maybe, just maybe, he's open to being worshiped in ways that I don't like and have never seen before. And maybe, just maybe, if I subject myself to that, I'll encounter a God that I never thought existed. A version of this Yahweh, Jesus, Trinitarian God that ought to be worshiped, and I've been keeping myself from him because I refuse to open up the constructs in my head. And so he warns his disciples against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I'm not sure that he doesn't continue to warn us today that if we don't subject ourselves to the very real, wild, indescribable, completely uncontainable Lord and Creator of the universe, that we might end up boxing ourselves in to a dead version of religion and actually worshiping nothing but ourselves. Ezekiel 1 presents notions that seem completely incompatible with each other. And maybe, just maybe, that's as close as we can get to understanding God. And if we think we've gotten farther, we're committing some sort of weird idolatry, where we think we've got him pinned down to 7 steps, 3-point sermons, a time for worship, a style, a number of songs, what a bulletin should look like. We think we've got him boxed into these ways, and all he's saying is, no, there's no way. You really want to know me, understand that you will never fully know me, and I will not be subject to your confines. Let's pray. God, thank you for a text like Ezekiel. Thank you for making yourself real to him. Thank you for making yourself real to 12 disciples 2,000 years ago. Thank you for making yourself real to us. Thank you for reminding us that there are things internal to you that don't match up with each other in our minds, in our hearts, and in our eyes. And we may never quite fully grasp them, and that's okay. Thank you for reminding us that you cannot be fully understood, fully known, and you can never be at all contained. You will never allow us to box you in to a sanctuary, a temple, a nation, a way of thinking, and a way of worshiping. That it should be the other way around. We subject ourselves to you. We become what you want us to become. We worship because you want us to, and because you deserve it.